just so that way we'll have. So we talked a lot about SAST and how to sell these components, how to sell the security tools, and we're talking about mainly what we're selling is the security dashboard and vulnerability report to allow the management of all these vulnerabilities, like what you do after the security, after the bugs have been detected, the security issues have been detected. So that's one important thing to show. And then how we maintain on our infrastructure the open source tools for the different languages. Okay, so thank you, everybody. That was a great conversation. So now what we can do is we'll go on, everyone can see the application was deployed. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and add the security scanners. So if I go back to the instructions here, we can go on to lesson 2. So lesson 2 has links to all the different, or maybe I didn't even add these. So it talks a little bit about the different types of security scans. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how easy it is to add these security scans to your pipeline. So what we do is we open the web IDE and we go to our GitLab ci.yaml. And I have these templates here. So I'll put them on the include. So right here, you can see that that each security scan is going to be enabled via a template. So we have SAST, DAST, the license scanning, container scanning, and dependency scanning, all enabled via template. So a template will just go ahead, will be put in the CI YAML file, and it'll all go ahead and just load everything that's needed for the scanner to run. We're also going to tell the SAST scanner to scan our Kubernetes manifest. So that's done by just adding a variable that scan Kubernetes manifest to true. We're going to set the variable for DAST to tell it what endpoint to scan DAST in. So this is going to be our CI project ID -staging, our ingress URL, and the notes path, which is where our application is located. So that means that DAST will be performed on this application. And then what we'll do is, so there's different stages. We're gonna go, oh, bless you.
Sorry to interrupt, but where's the lesson 2? Which folder is it under?
So lesson 2. So lesson 2 is going to be when you're in training users, right? And you go to the session. Lesson 2 is going to be in a different group called sample projects. And it'll be in this DevSecOps and active security instructions. Let me share that on the Slack.
I put the chat, the URL.
Thank you.
So you'll be in lesson 2. And lesson 2 will tell you what to add to the GitLab CI YAML. So we'll add the test and DAST stages. And then we'll press commit, and we can commit it to the master branch. So commit to master branch, and we can go ahead and press that. And then now you'll have a new pipeline running, which will build the container image. And if that's successful, it'll go ahead and run all the different tests. So here you can see that there's different SASTs. So there's Bandit SAST, there's ESLint SAST, there's KubeSec SAST. So these different SAST scanners appear because of the different languages within the project. So in case anyone asks, like, oh, well, I see multiple SAST jobs. The reason why is, for example, Bandit SAST is for the Python code, the static code, and then the kubesec SAST is for the Kubernetes manifests. And ESLint SAST, I'm not exactly sure what that's for. But it's for scanning some other type of static code. It might be the HTML templates that I have.
JavaScript.
JavaScript?
Yep, like Node.js.
Which I don't remember having that language on here, but probably do somewhere. I know I have HTML. Yeah, so that'll run. And while this is running, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just jump into just more stuff that I just want to share about the different scanners. So one thing I wanted to share was about GitLab 1311. And it has to do with the SAST. So if you've looked, GitLab and SemGrep, so upgrading SAST for the future. So let me see. So we're going to be adding SemGrep in order to find different bugs and to perform different scans. So that's just something new that's coming up. These things are constantly getting updated, so I'd watch for the new releases. SemGrep is some new scanner that we're adding that supports different languages. So there's some research being done on that. And that's just something I wanted to just point out. Yeah. So Json Reports is another thing. So there are ways. I recently published the video. That's the one with the racquetball. And I can send that to you. But it's about using this actual JSON report. So you can perform custom actions based off of this JSON report. So one thing, if a user wants to maybe send some data about vulnerabilities detected over time to Prometheus, or send email alerts every time there's a vulnerability detected on the master branch, or whatever it may be. What can be done is this can actually be parsed, and custom actions can be done in the pipeline, such as sending the email message, or kind of anything that you want to do with it. And that I show in this tech marketing DevSecOps. There's one called Simply Simple Nodes Blocking. And you can see that in this MR, I can cause the pipeline to fail and not proceed to deploy to staging because I detected more than one vulnerability. So I parsed this file, and what I did is I exported the number of vulnerabilities, and because the number of vulnerabilities is greater than 1, I can tell the job to fail and exit with a 1. So that shows just being able to block the pipeline from proceeding from the security scans. So yeah, and I can just share this with you on the Slack channel. And then going back, another cool feature that's a differentiator for us is being able to run all of our scanners in an offline environment or limited connectivity environment. So that's just one thing that's important to note, is that these things, if you have an environment that's very disconnected from the world, you can actually still run our scanners on there. I mean, you'd have to mount a drive and do some, you'd have to do something to actually get the image on there. But once the image is on there, you can run the scans not being connected to the internet. So that's one cool differentiator that we have. So now let's go back. Okay, so DAST is running now. In this little tab, you can see just kind of all the what's been detected within the master branch. So there's this possible binding to all interfaces. This will keep populating if something is found for DAST. So the only vulnerability that we found right now is just a SAST-based vulnerability, which gives us tells us that on line 6 there's an issue which is possible binding of all interfaces, which is because I hard coded this 000. So this is one way to view the vulnerabilities. This is not really part of like the workflow that developers are really going to use. This is just kind of if you want to see what vulnerabilities are within that pipeline or detected within that pipeline. So, and then this is the final report, which tells you all the vulnerabilities detected. And you can sort by the scanner type and the severity. And you can see all the vulnerabilities here in this view right here. And then now what I'll show you is kind of the regular developer workflow. So, and that'll be now in lesson 3, which will actually create an MR with a vulnerability. But before doing that, I kind of wanted to go over each different scanner. So I want to talk a little bit about like just the different scanners. So container scanning. One important thing to note is that right now we're using Claire as the open source tool for scanning the container images, but we're migrating to Trivy in the 14.0 release. So that's something customers ask exactly what tools are being used for this. You say that any release before 14 uses Claire, and after that we use Trivy, which we've actually seen Trivy detect a lot more vulnerabilities than Claire has. So we've done a couple studies of that, and I tested that out last week where I used the same project and then I was able to see more vulnerabilities detected with one versus the other. So pretty much, yeah, what this does is it'll just scan your container images, and it scans them against a database of which images are vulnerable, and then it'll just report that to the user. And same thing, this can work offline. Then there is dependency scanning, which scans the project dependencies. So what it does is it looks at particular files. So for example, in Python, we look at the requirements.txt file, and within the project that we're using, and that'll look in there and it'll check the versions of the tools that we're using. So when I go to requirements.txt, you can see that it has a bunch of different dependencies here. And what this does is if I had it set to Flask equals 0.1, let's say, it'd find a vulnerability on that because it's an older version that is vulnerable. Since I don't have a version number next to it, it's using the latest one, which is probably less susceptible to having vulnerabilities since they've most likely been resolved. And yeah, it doesn't work on every single language, but you can see which languages it does work in and which package managers it works on. And we use Gymnasium, which is a GitLab product for that.
I got a question for you, right? For that container scanning, if you create a new branch off of your default branch and you do development on that, and then you run the container scanning against that, then the number of vulnerabilities that were present in the default branch would have come over into the feature branch. And my understanding would be that if you look at the merge request widget, that container scanning should be showing 0 vulnerabilities because it was already there. However, what I end up seeing is because we do scanning against a new container image that was created in that build phase, it essentially shows all the vulnerabilities that were part of the default branch into the feature branch as potential vulnerabilities. And certainly during demos, I get questions on that. I wonder why that is the case, and if that is intended behavior, or if that is, I don't know, a defect.
So I would probably report that and ask, because ideally what you would want to see is just a diff, right? You wouldn't want to see it
Exactly.
detected as new ones. So I would open up a defect against that.
Okay. All right.
Ron, there are a couple things to note there. One is, when was the scan run on the default branch? And what was the version of the scanner being used to run at that time?
Mhm.
And then what is the version of the scanner that is being used at the time of the new branch, as well as what new container dependencies have come along with that new build. So there are like 3 or 4 variables there, and we don't control all of them. So that
or even
does
newly
have-
published vulnerabilities. Sorry to talk over you.
That's exactly it. No, so I'm getting to it, and that's exactly it. So you pointed that out. So generally, you should not see the same vulnerabilities show up. If you are seeing the same vulnerabilities, that is a bug. So please do report that. But if you see and they look similar, but they're different CVEs, that's likely what Jamie said, is it's new stuff that's coming in.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Perfect. So then there's the dependencies. There's DAST, which scans the running application. So DAST pretty much will try to break the application. So one thing to note is DAST should be run on a staging environment, never on production. It's going to go ahead and try to break into the application and try to find out where it's most vulnerable. So there's a few things that you need for DAST. You need the actual website that it's going to hit. And I'm going to show you kind of, sometimes you might not want to do this on every pipeline, just because it's intensive and may take a long time depending on the size of your application. So what I'll show you in this session is going to be the on-demand scans and how on-demand DAST works. And yeah, I'll show you all this stuff in action. There's different ways. I have to make a video about this, but this is on my to-do list, but how to get into a DAST application where you need to actually authenticate using basic auth. So that's something, there's variables to configure this, but I'll have to actually create an application that is protected for y'all to see. So that's on my to-do list. And then the last scanner that I'll go over is the license scanning. And then what the license scanning will do is it'll check the licenses that were detected in the dependencies, and it'll compare them to a policy that you set. And if there's any that are denied within that policy, it'll report that to you. So it scans the licenses and then just tells you, hey, this license was in your policy as blocked. And then you can add a safeguard so that way that the MR cannot be merged. So with that being said,
Another question for you. For that DAST scanning, you got active and passive modes. Can you talk about that a little bit, about what the difference is?
So I'm not too sure. So let me see. So there's active and passive modes. Let me see. Where do you see that? Okay. Okay. So passive scan, DAST executes the baseline scan that doesn't actively attack your application. DAST can be configured to perform active scan to attack your application and perform a more extensive security report. It can be very useful when combined with review apps. So it actually performs the attacks while one just performs the baseline scan. And let's see what that baseline scan includes.
But should I interpret that active scan as like pen testing?
I would say it's not, I wouldn't say it's like as in depth as like hiring a pen tester to do it and try to find it. But I would say it could definitely mess up the system because it does try to intrude upon it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they say like never run this in a production application.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like an example of what it runs. So it just checks like different things like passing cookies and weak authentication. Is there certain headers being passed or returned? So it'll check things like that in the regular scan.
So Ron and company, I found the following explanation handy for passive versus active. It's from the Zap website. I'm pasting it into the Zoom chat if you want to take a look later.
Yeah, thank you, Evan.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's really nice. And another thing to note is that we will also be migrating away from Zap. So that'll all change pretty soon as well.
What are we moving to?
I think it's an in-house one that's developed by that company we acquired, the Peach Fuzz.
Interesting.
So there's one that they're working on. So now let's get back to our exercise. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a vulnerability. So let's Browserker. There we go. That's the name of it. Okay, so we're going to go to the web IDE. And from the web IDE, we are going to open notes, db.py, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the database file readable, executable, and writable by the world globally. We are going to add a route to routes.py. So we will add a new route. We are going to create a Kubernetes template. So we're going to go to chart, templates, and here we'll create a new file. I called it vulns.yaml, so vulnerabilities.yaml. And I'll just paste this YAML in there. Then I'm going to go ahead and change the requirements. So in requirements.text, I'm going to go here. And let me see, did I miss anything? Okay, I think that's it. But I think I missed some stuff from lesson 2, actually. Yeah, okay. So I'll have that here, just saved on this tab. But the first thing that I wanted to go over was the actual merge request approvals and setting that up for the project. So that way you can see them within the project. So going to settings, general, and merge request approvals, you can see that there's a vulnerability check and there's a license check. So what we can do is merge request approval is required when a security report contains a new vulnerability of high critical or unknown, meaning that if there's a vulnerability of any of these severities detected, you're not going to be able to actually merge that MR unless someone from the group that we add approves it. So that's a safeguard that's present just to prevent vulnerabilities from going in without some type of check. So if I can enable it, I can add approvers. I'll just add demo systems users, and I can add myself, which is let me see, demo systems users.
While you're adding that, Fernando, a couple things I came across with this earlier this week with a customer. When we were adding the approval rules, you have to, I believe you have to have the security pipeline run at least once on the default branch, unless you won't see those enable buttons there.
Correct, yeah.
same with I think the license rules, like the license configuration, or something else. But in case you come across that in a demo and it doesn't allow you to enable that, run it on your default branch, and that should give you the check mark there.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right about that. If you've never run you don't have the security scans within the actual CIM, when you haven't run a pipeline, this won't show enable. And what you'll have to do, and if for any case it doesn't show the enable there, you'll have to add approval rule, and you have to manually type it in case sensitive. So you have to type in this is the old way that it was done, where you would actually put in a license check, and that would correlate to being like the license scan. That was the old way. But if you have the scanners enabled, this looks way cooler having just that enable button there. It makes customers feel a lot better, like, oh, I just clicked that. So yeah, I'll just put these users and add approval rule. So then you can see that the administrator has to approve license check and vulnerability check. So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna add the license policy. So to do that, you go to security and compliance, you go to license compliance. And so this tells us right now in all of our dependencies, these are the licenses that we've detected and where we've detected it. So you can see that there's a GNU v3, there's zip, there's the MIT license. And here is where we can set the policy. So we can add a policy, and what we'll do is we'll put Apache 2.0. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna deny this. So denying it gives it, in the merge request is gonna show a red X, and it's gonna actually let the license approval check that we have here come into play. So see, anytime it contains a denied license. So that'll allow the license approval to come into play. Now, actually approving a license just puts it on the list with a green check mark. It's just for you to know that you have it approved. It doesn't really have any functionality other than that. It's just nice to see a green check mark. If not, it'll just show it out in gray, but it won't have any effect. What does have an effect is actually denying the license. And what we'll do is we'll see that now in lesson 3. So now what we'll do is we will go ahead and commit this. So in lesson 3, we're gonna go ahead and commit the code. So if we follow the instructions, okay, change the Docker file. So go to Docker file. We're going to move this to 3.4 to put a vulnerable version. And then we're going to select commit. And we're going to create a new branch and start a new merge request. And then here we can see test the scanners. And we can submit that merge request. So now this is what the merge request looks like. The license approvals and vulnerability checks will show here. And what it'll say, you see that there's it's not going to allow the pipeline to merge because it has to wait for, number one, for the pipeline to finish. And then if any denied licenses or vulnerabilities of a particular severity were detected, this person right here would need to approve before this can actually be merged, before this thing will be enabled for you to merge. So any questions so far?
I have a question about the vulnerability check. Why only block high and critical and unknown vulnerabilities?
So that's the way it was designed. Right now, yeah, right now that's the way it was designed. I don't know if there's any plans for this, but ideally there should be something that's set by some type of administrator or security team of what they want to be able to pass and not. But this is just by design that it only blocks those type of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, some customers asking if they want to block some medium or low, they has nothing to do with that.
So in order to do that, right, they won't be able to use the merge request approvals. What they can do is they can for right now the workaround would be to use the JSON and parse that JSON that's in the that the security report generates, and then detect medium vulnerabilities, but it would require work on their side. I'd try to get in touch with the secure team in the channel. It's called S_secure, and see if that can be, maybe generate an issue requesting something like that, like a customizable merge request approval. Because right now, by design, it's just blocking for those.
Okay, thanks.
And to add on to that, Toshi, I think the SaaS team is looking at allowing you to override the severities of the vulnerabilities. I just shared it in the issue there if you want to track that. But if you were to override them and say you have like organizational policies that say this isn't technically critical, maybe this is more of a medium, or maybe this medium should be a high, there's some ways you can kind of leverage that to kind of trip that wire.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, we'll wait one more scanner to pass. So is everyone got all this to this point so far? And once I show you this part, we'll take like a little break, just because it's been already over an hour. So this security scan is loading, will stay loading until all the scans complete. So just in case, that someone thinks that, hey, some scans were already run, it has to wait for all the scans to complete. And another thing important to notice when running DAS, there needs to be an environment for DAS to run on. So I'm running it on a staging environment just because I want something similar to what my prod environment would be. But this can also be done on the review app for lighter weight applications, which is one thing that can be said. And since the security scan already finished, you can see that license compliance detected 2 new license and policy violations, so approval is required. And you can see that the out of compliance license is the Apache 2.0 license that was detected. And you can see that there's also another one that's uncategorized, which is coming from this Python. So if I were to have this approved, it'll just show a green check mark as, approved licenses, makes it easier to see. So now security scanning detected 20 potential vulnerabilities. So in a developer workflow, what would happen is you'd push the code, you create the MR, and now I would go through here and see what are the vulnerabilities that I detected in the system. So you can see that SAS detected 11 potential vulnerabilities. And what you can see is what line of code it was detected in. So you can see, oh, well, I have an issue here on this line of code. And it's that permissive mask was set on the file. It's severity medium. And there's also identifiers, which this contributes to developer education, helps developers become more security aware and know why they introduced the vulnerability to the system and what the cause of it is. So they have links to relevant educational information on the vulnerability, as well as how to resolve it. So they can see that these are things that shouldn't be done. And they have more information on file system permissions, and they can kind of learn about that. So it enhances developer education. So that's one of the important points of that. So, and it has every scanner separated by the different types of scanners. So you can see dependency scanning has different information. So each of them has different information based off the scanner. So you can see that in dependency scanning, you'll have some more information like links to the CVEs. You'll have what file it was in, and you'll have more identifiers like this is the CVE that tells you, what the vulnerability is and what versions it's in. So one thing to note, and this I think is a bug right here. It shows container scanning detected no vulnerabilities, but it shows vulnerabilities that should be in the system, and it says fixed. And this has been a known issue that I've seen. It should show them as new vulnerabilities, but it shows them as fixed vulnerabilities. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out.
Hey, from your experience, and maybe others can chime in, is that whole area around developer education stressed in other commercial products? I know CVE, I think, is a pretty common one to send them to the database to look at that bit, but the idea that of educating developers on things that aren't safe, I was just wondering if that's like for the SaaS stuff, is that common in the other SaaS, commercially available SaaS scanners?
So I think that it's not really promoted, but it is something that is common. Like, for example, I think JFrog and for sure GitHub. I've been doing some work with the GitHub stuff recently, and GitHub has similar features where it'll give you all this information within their SaaS tool about why it occurred, and it'll give you information on how to resolve it, and what are the best practices around it. So I think tools definitely do it, but no one really promotes it that much. Like, no one's really saying, hey, it's going to make you better developers because they're going to become more security aware. I think that's like a good message that we can send.
Cool.
So another thing that now this gets more towards the management of vulnerabilities. And within management of vulnerabilities, what I mean is there's actions that can be performed on it, on the vulnerabilities themselves. One can be dismissed. So what this does is I can write a message saying dismissing because this is a test database. I can add a comment and dismiss, and now you can see that it has been crossed out. So what this means is that once, let's say like this actually gets merged and someone from the security team approves this, they're okay with this issue, and they see this comment. And what this does is it really enables that collaboration between the developers and the security team. So let's say the security team is reviewing this based off the vulnerabilities. They can see a message, they can see that this is dismissed, and they can see the message, oh, well, that's why they dismissed it. This is a test database. This is only used for tests, so it's okay for it to have these permissions. And what will happen is that once this actually gets merged in the security dashboard and vulnerability report that I'll show later, it'll show that this vulnerability as dismissed, as well as with the metadata, which is this right here, as to why exactly it was dismissed. So it gives the security team just information on what developers are doing, and and it helps them better assess like the security posture of a project. There's also another action that can be done on these vulnerabilities from this merge request view, and that's creating an issue. So if I click on this create issue button, you can see that there's an issue that says investigate vulnerability, and it gives us the actual name of the vulnerability, and it gives us the description with a link to it and some identifiers. And it's important to note that this is a confidential issue. So what the reason that this is done is so that way those who are part of the project can collaborate together on resolving it without letting anyone from the outside know. So let's say you don't want anyone else from your organization to know that this component is vulnerable, or this is an open source tool that you don't want anyone to know is vulnerable. You can work on this together without alerting anyone towards this being a vulnerable component. So you can keep track of information on here, and you can even create a confidential, you can even create a confidential branch as well to work on this. There used to be a button here, which I'm not seeing anymore, but there used to be a button that says create a confidential, branch. So that way you can work on it together, and you can merge it in without letting anyone know that this is something that's being worked on. I'm not sure why it's not displaying right now.
Hey, Fern, that changed a couple of releases back. It happens by default now. The reason I know is I got kind of caught in a demo. I didn't know the change had occurred. So they're confidential by default. At this point, we toggled it the other way. And the difficulty that caused me was I was unable to create like a merge request. So I had to remove the confidential label.
Gotcha. So this is a confidential issue, but if I want to create a confidential merge request based off of this issue, how would I do that? There used to be a button right here. Like I remember last time I did this demo.
Oh, I never got to the bottom of it. I've simply made the issue non-confidential and just split up my merge request, but because I was in a demo and I had to move on. So I apologize. I don't have the answer. I'm that guy that only calls out the problems and never provides a solution.
No worries at all.
Bad.
I'll try to get that information for y'all. What's been changed, but there used to be a button that said create confidential merge request. Let me see if it's in my let me see if it's in this project. So going here, issues. See there, this would be what you would see. This is GitLab.com. So it creates a confidential issue, and then what you should see, I don't know why it's not showing in the demo systems. I mean, it could be a permissions thing, but there'll be a button that says create confidential merge request. And what you can do is you can create a branch, and that branch would be confidential. And that means that only those with permissions can actually work on that branch and contribute code to that branch without letting anyone that's not particular access in the project to see it.
Fern, I think it has also got to do with the project visibility, if it is private or what's the other one that we have?
Public.
I think that, yeah, public. This particular one, I don't think is public. I don't know what's this tech marketing DevSecOps is. What's the visibility on that? Do you know?
So this one's public right here.
Yeah, so I think that one allows you to do it. If it is marked private, then it's the combination of private and confidential, which does not do it. So there's some specific rules around that. Anyway,
gotcha.
Yeah, I think for my private project on GitLab.com, it doesn't show private merge request creation button.
Okay, so with that, if there's, I can answer a couple questions, and what we'll do is we'll take a 10-minute break.
Fernando, sorry, I joined a little bit late. I'm trying to import the demo workshop into my project, but it's not working. Any idea why?
Oh yeah, so there was an issue with it not being a template at the start. So what you would have to do is when you go to your group and you go to your groups, you go to training users, you go to your session, and you go to the project where you're the owner. What you do is you press new project, and instead of creating from template, what you would do is you would import the project, and you would choose repo by URL. And then what you do is you'd put your username and password here, and the GitLab repository URL will be the one. I'm gonna send it in the chat.
Okay, so.
Maybe I had sent it earlier. Let me see. It's gonna be.
Yeah, it's in the chat window, but it's way back. I don't know if you can find it.
I'll just get a new one. Let's see, sample projects. This one. Clone this. Okay, I can put it in the Slack, and I'll put it in this chat. So that'll be what you paste in here in the GitLab repository. Make sure you put your username and password for the user you created, and then just create project.
Try it now. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then all the rest of the instructions should work fine. It was just the first one that the templates weren't there.
And Fern, I remember doing one of the virtual workshops where we were doing the whole sample projects and all that. There is a little bit of wiring up to do. If you're doing any more of these, ping either James or Jeff. Jeff knows the dance. I think it's just there's something in the wiring that wasn't quite completed, because we were able. Mark and I did it, or Steve-O and I did it. I don't remember which. I think Mark and I did it, and there was like an extra step that if you don't do it properly, then the template doesn't show up.
Yeah, I might have forgot like one thing.
Yeah, or it wasn't obvious, but I'm pretty sure Jeff or James can walk you through it just in case you want to fix that for future use.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I don't remember the exact. I don't remember what it was, but it was some magic.
Yeah. I mean, this is the third time I've used demo systems. I used it once before with Shen, then I did this same workshop before, and then this is my third time, so still getting familiar.
Yeah, show us that house plant, Eugen.
Yushin has a house plant?
I didn't say live in house plant. So you got to read between the lines. I work in sales.
I got a house plant right here.
Yeah, well, the problem is Eugen keeps feeding it beer, and the beer is just not working.
This is the easiest plant to keep alive, the snake plant.
I bet I'll find a way to kill it, Vern. I'll find a way.
We actually killed one of them. I don't know what happened. It just died. But it's a beginner plant.
Next time, send me your dead plants. I will bring them back to life.
I'll mail one over. I'll mail a snake plant over. What other plants? Succulents. A bunch of plants outside died because of the freeze. So we had like this big agave right in the front yard, and then we had to cut like the bottom parts. It looks kind of like a pineapple now. It'd be just because we had to cut off the I don't know what you call it. You don't call it leaves or any, I don't know.
Yeah, the dead fronds, stems, things, growth. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to cut those, and then like a bunch of other plants died. Some lantana. I'm learning a lot about plants because I'm doing like landscaping in the house. So my girlfriend always wants to change the plants every 3 months, or they die. So it's just been pretty funny, just becoming a landscaper part-time.
So what's harder, plant maintenance or SAS scanners?
Probably plant maintenance, because I never got.
I'll give you a demo on succulents if you like, Fern.
That'd be great. Honestly, you could do like a cool video with all the different succulents, and then you can talk about like how succulents are like a pipeline. This is how you water them, and
yeah, it's getting to the point where my husband's like, "Don't you dare bring out any more, or don't you propagate anymore."
I mean, I've gone so bad with like not watering that I even have boxwoods that are dying, and those things are like impossible to kill.
Yeah, so get on your Google Calendar and type every 3 weeks to give your plants 2 ice cubes, and that's it. And that's how you will keep them alive.
That's actually a good idea because it's easier because the hose I have to like unroll it and then spray and then roll it back in, and that's kind of tedious to me. So if I just get ice from the freezer and just throw it there, they'll all survive.
Dude, one cup of tequila, 2 ice cubes, finish, and recycle. You're good to go.
Actually, well, the agave is used to make tequila, right? So you would think that tequila would work.
So Fern, if it makes you feel any better, my backyard is a mix of agaves and various tropical fruit trees. Now, my agaves, I have 3 kinds. I have smooth agave, I have the regular century plants, and I have the variegated century plants. They recently, all except the smooth ones, got infected by agave snout weevil. So I had to chainsaw all of them except the smooth ones. And ooh, that's not fun. The funny part is, within them came out all those little agave snout weevil larvae, which is the thing you find at the bottom of a tequila bottle. But my plants were big. They were the things like, I mean, they're about as tall as I am, which doesn't mean much, I'm 5'8", but they were real big. And man, that was a real big job. Banana trees and agave. And it was probably about 2 months before I had any room in my trimmings bin. So don't feel bad. And the number of cuts I inflicted on myself taking out the agave, that was fun.
Yeah. Sounds like a banana daiquiri or something. All the ingredients for something good in the rawest form.
Well, no, here's what sucks because I don't know if anyone else here, maybe Sarah, could have warned me, but banana plants are fast growers and they get, decently tall, like 10, 15 feet. But once they produce 1 cluster of bananas, they're done. That's all they do. They produce 1 cluster. They're also pup like mad. So I have to chop them down soon as they fruit. The reason is I live in a high wind area and we get 85-mile-per-hour winds regularly, straight line through our backyard. So that creates 2 kinds of fun. One is it knocks the fruit down and it can crash into a fence, like the whole banana plant. The other is I have to get up on a freaking ladder and cut them down in that wind. So Fern, don't worry, I'm there right there with you.
You chin in the wind doing this, right? Oh, that is not good.
They look really nice, and people here comment, and I'm like, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's interesting. I just bring a 6-pack, and it feels fine.
I've always just wanted to, plant something really weird.
Don't do it. I've done that. I have so many things. Like I threw a little passion fruit vine back there, and now the thing's taken over the whole backyard, and it's fighting with the agaves and the strawberries, and I have fig trees that are now dominating. And agaves, Fern, once those root systems get established, you can't stop them from pupping left or right.
That's true, because I see little ones pop up in random places.
Yeah. At first, I was like, I don't want to kill them. I feel bad. Then I learned why you got to get rid of them, because they're like palm trees, right? Once those roots get into your irrigation, once they get under your foundation, life gets fun in a hurry.
So Fern, you need to plant a purple avocado tree. They're very rare and they sell for crazy and they're really easy to take care of. And then you can have a side hustle where you sell them. And they are, I think it's called the Gwen, and they are so cool.
They might sell it.
If I lived in a tropical area, I would have some.
Oh. Purple avocado tree. Look at that.
Oh, that's trippy. Whoa. Is that real? Is that what they
are real. Yeah.
Those look a little nuclear.
You can get them at some real bougie restaurants. You can go and get Disney has them on their specialty.
Actually, I got an idea.
I could do guac and chips that's purple.
How about I just put food coloring and like pre-workout powder, and it'll be a pre-workout avocado. So if people want to hit before they hit the gym, they can have this energy avocado, like it's kind of like a Monster energy drink, but it's an avocado and it's healthier. There we go.
Go for it. I'd be willing to see pictures of that.
All right. Well, it seems like we've taken a good break. We talked a little bit about some cool plants. I'm gonna see if I can find some of that purple avocado. After this, I learned something new. So I guess if everyone's ready, we can continue on to the next session. Perfect. So going back to the project, this one. Okay, so we have our merge request created. So one thing that I wanted to show before we went on to the security dashboard was at the end of lesson 2, we can run a dash scan on demand. So this is one thing that I wanted to point out. It's that as your application gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it may take a long time to run DAST. And if you have so many different merge requests and you're running DAST all on the same environment, it could conflict with each other and it could cause issues. Like if there's maybe developers are working on different patches at the same time, and they're pushing all this code, and now you have DAST running, it could cause problems in the system because it's all might be running at the same time, and it could take a long time and cause delays. So with that being said, a policy can be created like internally within the organization saying, hey, we're not going to run DAST in the pipeline. We're just going to run it at this time that we want. We're just going to run it on staging every once a week, or it's up to the team how they want to operate. But if that's the case, they can go to security and compliance. They can go to on-demand scans. And what can be done here is they can create a new scanner profile. So what we're going to do here is we'll create a new scanner profile. And we'll call this my DAST. We can select the mode that we want. We can select the timeout. So this is the maximum number of minutes allowed for the spider to traverse the site. The spider goes and finds all the different paths within the site. So just to test it out, I'll just make sure that I'll put the max timeout. The timeout that it takes to hit the target. We'll turn on the Ajax spider. And we'll just save this profile. So that's the scanner profile, just the settings on how the scanner is going to run. Now I'm going to create a profile for the actual website, which is pretty much just putting the URL of the site. Just going to say this is simple notes. And I'm going to add the URL of the application. So let me I can just get that from the job that ran. Deploy staging. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to save that profile. And now I can just run my scan. So scan's name, okay. Description, scan, staging on demand. And then I will press save and run scan. And then you can see that just DAST is running independently. So this is just something cool to know. Just so you can tell developers that don't want to be constantly running SAST or DAST, or maybe you have projects where you're not running DAST because they're dependent on other services, right? That this is a good point to show. Let's say I have 5 different microservices and different repos, but they all need to be deployed within an environment to work. So I have all these scripts working and they all deployed into the same namespace and they get everything working. DAST will not work on each one of them individually, or it wouldn't make sense for each one of them to run DAST because it's all the same website. It's just a different component being scanned. In that case, you would want to run on-demand DAST and have DAST disabled for those projects. So that's just one good way that saves time and effort.
And Fern, I had a case where the customer just, truthfully told us there was a point in time where large projects in maintenance mode weren't going to get, GitLab CI backported. And so they were just saying, look, we're going to keep the old build system for those. It's not worth it. New stuff, sure. And so what they said was, have you got a way to, run DAS scanning without having to have the extra support of the GitLab pipeline? And I was like, yes, you can. So they loved that idea, because in that case, they didn't have to spend tremendous amounts of extra time going back to things that they were trying to leave in the past, but had to keep maintaining for a certain amount of time until they could end of life it.
Yeah, that's one thing that you'll probably get from a lot of different customers asking that too.
Especially if they're older. I mean, if they're a customer that's been around 10, 15 years, they're clearly going to have stuff that was built ages ago, or is built in a way that they don't want to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And so, but they do want to know what their security vulnerability baseline is. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, and they may only expose one part of the application, right? Like in the microservice architecture, right? You'll have all these different pods running, but maybe only one pod will have access to the outside world via the ingress. So you're not going to be able to test, DAST appropriately on all these other pods, right? Because there are just secondary, services that are just communicating with each other.
I had a question. So I'm on evaluation right now, and the customer's trying to figure out a quick way to do DAS testing without having to go through the hoops of setting up a separate environment through their IT. Does anyone have tips on trying to suggest them on kind of that route of testing out DAS without going through that hurdle?
I think you would use the what is it called? What's that? The review app. So they would use the review app, but that would only work if it's like a single, if it's not like a multi-level microservice architecture. If it's just like an application, they can use the review application, then run DAS on that review app, and then that would work out of the box, but it just depends on the complexity of their application.
Gotcha. Do we have any like quick sample apps that points to either like some cloud provider and they can quickly spin something up? Do we have any samples like that?
I don't think we do have anything like that, that they can just spin up like a cluster or whatever. I mean, I did have in this, if you look at this GitLab marketing, this simple notes, there is a video that shows how to, so if you click on this, it does have a video which shows you how to set this up on your own environment, a demo on a GKE cluster. So I go over kind of how to set this up, how to set GKE up, and then how to deploy this.
Okay.
So there's information on that, but there's no nothing quick that'll just create the cluster and do all that for you.
Okay, this might be my answer. Thank you.
So once that DAST is run, a single use DAST, then they can check here within the security. And from there, they can see all the vulnerabilities that were detected from that single DAS scan. They can just resolve, go through the different ones, figure out what it is that they need to resolve. So you can see that there's a request and there's the actual response, and it'll tell you what exactly is missing, give you a description, and give you a solution. So you need to pass in this X content security policy header. And then what you can do is add all these different rules and then rerun DAST to see if they've been resolved. So that's pretty much how the workflow would be in this case.
So for something that I get asked a lot, and I know there's ethics around it, is we're a Jira shop. We'll never use your issues. But every time you spot a vulnerability and you say, create an issue from it, guess what it does? Creates a GitLab issue. So I was wondering if there's anything else that you've encountered other than, like I said, I know there's an epic that's around, sort of promoting Jira to being a first-class citizen sort of in our environment.
And you
So
can create an issue directly in Jira
yeah.
now.
So create a Jira issue from vulnerability.
Exactly.
Let me see if they have a screenshot of that.
Yeah, that's is it done?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. When
done.
did it come out? It must have come out in the last release then.
I think it was the last release or the release before that. Yeah.
13.9.
13.9. Yeah.
13.9.
I pasted the docs into the Zoom chat.
Oh, look at that. Sweet. You answered my question. All right, that works great. Are there any places where we haven't fired it in yet? That's always the gotcha, right? You think you know what you're doing and go, yeah, you can create a Jira. And then there's like, but you can't do it here. Or you could do it here, but you can't do it there.
I'm not sure about that. I know like it'll be like that. Like it'll say, like, see where it says create issue, it'll say create issue in Jira, but I'm not, like, that's what it'll say. It'll say create Jira issue right there.
That's pretty nice. I'm gonna have to go back and look that up. I missed that.
The bigger challenge that I haven't taken a look at yet, Ken, is you could have multiple Jira projects that might be related to your code repository. So, and I think it's still only a one-to-one mapping at this point. I think it ties it to, like you could see in that screenshot that Fern had up a little bit earlier, you have the project code. I think it said like SEC-number, right? So it might still not go to the project that you want. I don't know for sure, but you might have that mapping issue.
Good to know. Thanks, Ron.
Fern, in that lesson 3, just before that step 5, it talks about some bug about the approvals. What's the bug? I mean, I see the behavior, but can't quite figure out what the actual bug is.
So the bug is like if you add yourself as an approver, it'll let you just it'll where is it? If you add yourself as the So what it'll do is, like, let's say I put myself as the approver, it'll still have this check mark here without approval. It'll like it won't actually block the MR if you add yourself to it.
But it is related to adding yourself to it. Okay, got it.
Yeah, yes. So yeah, if you add yourself to it, then you'll be able to merge it without a problem, without the scans even running.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So next thing I'll move on is the viewpoint from the security team and the AppSec engineers. So accessing the security dashboard. So if you go to security and compliance and security dashboard, right now, you're not going to see anything because this is going to be populated over time. So every day there'll be different charts showing the vulnerabilities that were introduced over time and their severity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a project that's been worked on that has had stuff introduced over time. And this is what you'll see. So you'll see this dashboard. It's been pretty static. You haven't seen much change, but you can see that there's like a little bump here that there was, a couple medium vulnerabilities introduced. And this is within this time frame from 4/11 to 4/20. But with this chart right here, we can actually go back in time, and it keeps a log of a year, so 365 days. And you can see that over time, the vulnerabilities that are info level have increased a lot on 3.3. So you can see that there's been a big increase from that. So what's the purpose of this whole thing? Well, it allows you to see the progress of the security of your project. So it allows you to see, hey, has anyone been actually working on vulnerabilities and fixing them? Have they been doing bug squashes? Have they been introducing new things? And we can see what days new things were introduced and why. So we can go through the history and the logs and just kind of assess what's going on with our project from a security standpoint. So that's pretty much what there is for that. They recently added like new buttons where you can just kind of zoom in to different parts, and you can, go redo and undo certain things and actually download an image of it. So if you want to show a report, let's say we did really well during we had a security hackathon and we wanted everyone to solve, these problems. And then we wanted to show leadership that these hackathons are doing well. It's resolving lots of issues. We can take a little screenshot of it and then we can show that and paste the image somewhere. So that's just a cool little feature. Now going back to our report. So this over time will just keep getting populated. Like tomorrow, there'll be a little blip. Then there is the vulnerability report, which is going to be where the security team mainly, collaborates and has a viewpoint of everything going on within the system. So within this project, we can see the last time that, and this is only for the default branch. So note that this is only for the master branch. What this is a report that the security team will have access to, where they have an overall insight of all the vulnerabilities within the project. So they can sort by the different statuses, by the different severities, the different scanner types, and if there was any activity on the issues, like if there are any issues created, if they were no longer in the system. So there's a bunch of different stuff on that. And what they do in this point is they'd look through everything that we have on master. So let's say these are all the vulnerabilities that are currently in production. And what they would do is they would kind of triage things. So from here, I would go and I would see, okay, well, possible binding to all interfaces. I know that's a known issue. I've seen that before. It was detected an hour ago. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that. And I can change the status and it'll now be shown as confirmed. It'll tell me that I confirmed it. If I refresh, it'll show my little icon there. So it'll show that I've confirmed this vulnerability and I can add notes. So I can say found today. And I add little comments to it. And then all the AppSec engineers or security team can collaborate on these issues and they can really assess, what's going on in the system. And now if I look at vulnerabilities that were confirmed, I can see that that one is there and I can click on it. And then I can see that I was found going to fix later. So, it enables that communication between the security team. And if it was dismissed and it was merged, you would see it under dismissed, and then you would see that the reason that the developer gave. So when you would look through dismissed, you would see it there with the reason that the developer gave to dismiss it. So this is one of our big selling points, is that you get the scanners, right? You get the different scanners. SAST is the only one that's available on the free version, but all the other scanners are only available in Ultimate. But you get this management console where you can really assess that posture and be able to have the security team really be able to triage everything, to collaborate and just comment on everything and just kind of work together within this interface. So is there any questions so far on that?
So Fernando, when you dismiss a vulnerability on one branch, that I noticed that it does dismiss it across all the other branches, the same vulnerability, right? Or
yeah, that's correct. So if you dismiss it on one branch, it'll dismiss it. If it's merged into master, it should be dismissed in wait a second. I'm getting confused with what I'm saying. So if you dismiss it and then it gets merged to master, then it'll show it as dismissed here. But you're talking about if you, so if I were to create a new branch, right? Mm-hmm. With this vulnerability, that it will also show it as dismissed?
Yes.
So let's test that out, because I haven't seen that before. So If that does happen, I'm not sure if that's intended or not. So web IDE, and let's go to notes. And what I'll do here is I'll just remove the other template so we only run SAST.
So basically now you are adding the same vulnerability that you dismissed on the other branch.
Yes. Yeah, because here I dismissed. So if I go here, I go here. So the one that I dismissed is this permissive mask, which is this one.
Yep.
So I'm re-adding it here.
Yep.
So we'll wait and we'll see. We'll see if it does that. But yeah, that's a good question. I haven't encountered that behavior before. The only thing I can think of is that if it puts it within our database of vulnerabilities, if it's the same one and if it's already seen it dismissed in one place, it'll dismiss it in all places. That's the only thing I can think of it being something intended. But as I said, I haven't seen this before, so I'm not too sure. So while that's running, does anyone have any questions about this vulnerability report?
So that discussion really is a discussion then about conflict resolution in a way of the same type of vulnerability that might have been pulled into different feature branches as part of different development work streams, right?
You're talking about the dismissal across various,
So you have a vulnerability that sits in your default branch, and developer 1 creates a feature branch to do some development. Developer 2 creates another feature branch. It sits in both of those feature branches. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that, or what I'm hearing said in the conversation is, if it's getting dismissed on one feature branch, it's then getting dismissed on another feature branch also. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking the reason is because we keep the like a hash of that vulnerability within our database, and then what ends up happening is if it's found in another and it's shown, it checks it, probably it has a status as dismissed, and then when another one comes up, it checks it against the database, and then it shows it as dismissed already. That's what I'm thinking the logic would be around that.
Well, to that same token, then, I mean, the chance is probably super small, but what if somebody, in one feature branch tried to create an issue for that vulnerability and somebody in the other branch tried to also create an issue? Does it get duplicated, right? I mean, again, chance is probably super small that would happen, but.
We'll confirm it now. So yeah, see, so it shows it as dismissed in the new one. And it'll show the issue. So they won't be able to create an issue. It'll show the original issue.
Mm-hmm.
So this is number 1. And then this
would it show here? Sorry, would it show here who dismissed it from the other team?
Yeah, it should say invited user dismissed it. So now when I go on this other one, see, it'll tell me invited user dismissed it. So it tells you who dismissed it, and it'll tell you in what pipeline it was dismissed. It won't tell you like in what MR, but it'll tell you in what pipeline.
And the pipeline relates to an MR, right? So you can bounce your way there.
Yeah, I can go here, and then I can go here.
Yeah, exactly. You could 2-hop your way back to the MR if you needed to.
So next thing I wanted to go over, and just to continue talking about that vulnerability report, is that, and security dashboard, is that it can also be done at the group level. So if you see the security dashboard at the group level, you can see just how many vulnerabilities were introduced over time in the group overall. And then there's different project security status. And this is just tells you like, if there's critical vulnerabilities, it'll list the projects with an F. If there's high, it'll list it with a D, and so on and so forth. You know, if they had medium and low, it'll list them in the different categories. And then the vulnerability report for a group is the same as for a project, except that now you have everything that's in the group and you can filter by project this time. So that's the only big difference. This is just, you're working with a whole bunch of projects, you're a security team, and realistically, a security team would probably be working in the group. They'd be working with a whole bunch of different projects and then assessing the posture of each one. And then this just puts everything kind of at their fingertips of everything vulnerable within the system itself and the group itself.
I have another newbie question.
Yeah.
How do we determine what's critical versus high, medium, et cetera?
So it actually matches against the CVE. And that's what tells us, you know, depending on its actual status within the CVE, that tells us what severity it is.
So critical is like CVSS score 9 and above or 8 and above or something?
I'm not exactly sure on that. Let's we can take a look at one of them that was see like a high one. So if we go to CVE, let's see, where's the severity rating?
Click the link above. I think you can see the CVSS score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 9.8 critical. So that should be shown as a critical vulnerability. Betsy, because of this, is shown as a high. So I think it's using this version 2.0 database.
Interesting. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm. My question is, this is about dependency scanning. So you can use CVE, but for SASE, there's no CVE exists because that's a different type of vulnerability. So how do we score the rank for SASE or other scanning?
So it depends on the tool. For right now, this one's using Bandit. So let me go to the MR.
Can I ask you, it comes from each engine, right?
Yes. Yeah, depending on what the actual engine is. So let me expand this. So you can see that this is from Bandit because it's a Python. So SAS is running Bandit, and this is the identifier that it gives. And I think there is like if I look at Bandit Python, there might be like a file that tells me configuration. Let me see, Bandit Python. Here we go. Okay, so if I actually see this, there might be a file somewhere. I'm not exactly sure how this one does it, but there may be some type of like rule set.
Okay. So maybe, maybe the same type of vulnerabilities like SQL injection from Python and from Java, maybe the scores are different.
Yeah, right. I'm not exactly sure how it scores these, but I'm guessing it would be either based off the vulnerability or some type of rules engine. Usually it's based off of like different rules, which core.
Yeah, but each engine, the scoring rule of each engine is independent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, which is what I was saying earlier about normalizing the score, right? If each engine reports it slightly differently, how do you give a consistent answer? And I think the original thought was they tried their best to give a ranking that was consistent within GitLab. But Toshi, I don't recall whether we have it listed anywhere. Like it would be nice, right, to have a table that says for this scanner we rate severity as 10 through 12 versus this scanner we rate severity as 8 through 10. I don't know if that exists.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that will be very difficult because
I think there is this table. I've posted in the chat. Maybe it's helpful.
Yeah, so CS shows the CVS 2.0 rating. So whenever possible, the following list available severity levels. Yeah. So this is based off the CVE 2.0 rating.
Nice. Summer for the win. That's good.
Yeah, so each open source scanning tool provides their own native security severity level value. So that's in the case of the Bandit, it'll provide its own value for it. But then like the other ones that we saw with the CVEs that showed high, like that when we went into security dashboard, and then we saw, vulnerability report. And then we saw this one right here, these were marked as high. Then when we went to the actual CVE, we can see that, this one uses a 3.0 and it's marked as high.
Yeah, but CV is going for dependency scanning and container scanning because it is a known vulnerabilities.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, because dependency scanning, container scanning, and container scanning, dependency scanning have to be known vulnerabilities because that's the way that you match them. It would be a CVE.
Yeah.
Okay, so that concludes lesson 3. The next 2 lessons are going to be around fuzzing. So I'm going to go over coverage-based fuzzing, and then I'm also going to go over web API fuzzing. So in each case, one of them, the coverage-based fuzzing is going to be done on the actual static code, and it'll be something that we actually inject into code, like a decorator in Python. And what this will do is it'll send a bunch of random data to that function to try to crash it. And then that'll expose different bugs and different issues within that function. So we can get started with that. Let me just close a few tabs. Okay, so what we do is we'll open up the web IDE. We'll open the CI YAML. And then let's get rid of all the different security scans, just so that way we don't have so many things running on the system. What we'll do is we'll include coverage fuzzing as a template. We'll have to include a job called myFuzzTarget. It can be named whatever you'd like, but I just called it. And this will tell us which fuzzer to use. So right now you have to it won't auto detect it. You actually have to build it. And I'll put cfuzz as a stage. So I'm going to build, then I'm going to run the coverage fuzzer that I defined in this stage, and then I'm going to deploy it. And I'm going to tell it to run the PyFuzz engine on fuzz.py. So what's going to happen here is it'll run that job, and then it'll build artifacts from that coverage fuzzing template. Will be used to build some artifacts, and then we can review the artifacts and see, kind of everything that's going on. So we'll create a file called fuzz.py. And let's add this to fuzz.py. So you can see the decorator here. So what this does is it's telling, it's a decorator used for Api Fuzz. Now each coverage fuzzer, there's some for different languages, and I'll go into the documentation now, but we'll have different ways of being done. In Python, a decorator is used. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna pass in random data for this parameter right here. So string equals buff.decode in ASCII. Well, buff is gonna keep being something different. It'll just keep being a different string, and you'll just keep passing different things until it tries to break the application. Now so notice what's going to be caught here is I'm only accepting a Unicode decode error, right? But I'm not accepting other errors. So by passing random data, it'll probably find other exceptions. So this is one way. So what has to be done in this is they have to instrument their code pretty much. They'll have to add these decorators towards different functions that they want to fuzz, run the coverage fuzzing, and then probably go ahead and just clean up the code. So that'd be a way of running this. And I committed to the master branch. And now let's see our pipeline run. So I'll let that run, and I will dive you into the coverage-based fuzzing documentation that we have. So these are the languages right now that are supported. These are the fuzzing engines that it uses, and then there's different examples for each one. So this is pretty much just, hey, like we already have these security scans, they're finding known data, they're running on static things. Now let's try to actually crash our application logic and our application code by just sending a bunch of random data to it. And it won't just expose security issues, it'll expose just random issues that can be, part of the application itself, which in terms can affect the security of the application. Like if it causes something to crash, it can be susceptible to more malicious behavior. So far, any questions on coverage fuzzing? Okay, so we'll let it run. One thing to note is that this is a pretty long running job. It's going to go through many iterations of different things, of different random data to try to crash the application. So while that's running, I'll go into one that has already completed. So let me go to training users. And I'll go to this one. And if I go to coverage fuzzing, so one thing to note is that the job is always going to show as a failure. So it'll show as a failure, and that doesn't mean, that's just because the actual script failed and it detected an error. So it won't show it as pass like the other security scans do. And when we click on it, you can see that it failed right here. Raised not implemented error, you can see kind of the issue. And if you go into the job artifacts, you can browse and you can see the report, the coverage fuzzing report. So let's download it. And I open an Xcode for some reason. Okay. And so here you can see that the crash type was an uncaught exception, and it'll give you a stack trace. It'll give you some metadata about the actual scanning, and it'll said that it raised the not implemented error. So we can see that it found that we're not catching every exception. It'll give us a link to the CWE, and gives identifiers. So that caught an issue within our code, and then that shows that, hey, we're missing some exceptions that we need to catch, or maybe we can do a catch all and that, and helps for a better better written code. So also wanted to note, if I had put that fuzz test as an MR, so if I had done it as an MR, it would have shown it in the same pop-up as the security job. So if I had, go to the, so if I had actually created an MR with this stuff in it, it would show it in the pop-up like it does for the security scans. So I would show it like this, uncaught exception, and it'll show it with all the other vulnerabilities. There would be a section that says coverage fuzzing, and then you'd be able to see that uncaught exception with everything in it, just how it'll just pretty much parse that file, that JSON file that I showed you, and then generate this little snippet where you can also dismiss and create issues from it. And that's even passed down, if it's merged into master, that's passed down to the security dashboard as well. So you have all these tools in one interface. You have all your security scans, you have coverage fuzzing, and then you'll also have whatchamacallit, web API fuzzing, which I'll show you now in this next lesson.
Fernando, is there a way to set a timeout on that fuzz test similar to how DAST has the spider timeout, where you can like shorten the time and tweak that to speed up for like maybe testing purposes?
So I didn't see any variables that you can do to do that. Oh, here we go. There we go.
Oh, sweet. Okay, thank you.
So you'll set the additional arguments and then you'll pass max total time. So it'll tell you how long it should run for.
Awesome.
Fernando, I think the behavior of coverage fuzzing is different from other scanning too, because when it detects something, it shows failure, right? And the other scanning it is still successful.
Correct, yeah. The other scanners will show successful and show things found, or this will show a failure because the application actually crashes. So the test job running on, so it's running that fuzz.py, but it keeps running it with different random data. So what will happen is at some point it'll crash because of that random data that's passed. So then it'll show it as a failure. I'm not sure if that's going to be changed or not.
Additional question is, we still use open source engines for coverage fuzzing too, right?
Yes, yes.
This is not something like commercial. This was not commercial engines, right?
Correct. We're using these tools right here. libfuzzer, gofuzz, these different open source tools.
API fuzzing was a commercial.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
API fuzzing is from that the Peach Fuzz acquisition.
Okay.
So lesson 5 will be the web API fuzz testing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add web API fuzzing to, all right, let's go back. Okay, so I'm going to open the web IDE and follow the instructions here. So we need to create a file called test open API. Okay, let's do the first step first. So add the contents of this configuration file to your repository's roots and name it .gitlabfuzzing.yaml. So create a new file called gitlabfuzzing.yaml. And we're going to copy this right here. So this is pretty much the template that tells you all the different types of scans that can be run for web API fuzzing. So an example would be like long 100. It'll run like a longer set of scans. This is the different profiles that there are. So it'll run a longer set of scans. There's medium 50, medium 20. So there's just different types of tests. Some are more some are just more tests and more deep than others. Then we are going to add a file called test open API. And these are all going to be added to the root. So I'll add this file right here. And this is going to be my Swagger file, which has been renamed OpenAPI. And I'm going to change this right here to the actual project ID number. So you have to change this. I can't use environment variables. So I actually have to change this manually. So I know that my project ID's name or number is 13872. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to paste it there. Then I'm going to add the template for API fuzzing to the GitLab CI.yaml. So let's add API fuzzing. And we need to add a couple of variables. So let's go to variables. We're going to remove these because we're not using them. And so we're going to tell Fuzz use the profile quick 10. We are going to tell to use this Swagger file, which defines the paths and the tests within the within the Swagger file within the application. And we're going to put the URL that we're targeting, which is going to be our notes application. And you can see the Swagger file has information about that. So it tells us this is the host, this is the base path. So it'll be this host / notes. And then the path that we're going to test on is the /add path. And then it gives us a little bit of information on what exactly it accepts and what it should send back. We're going to remove this cfuzz. And we're going to add it after the deploy stage because deploy actually deploys to staging. And then we need the actual running application to send requests to. So then we're putting fuzz. And then we're just going to verify everything looks right. And then let's just go ahead and commit this to master. So let's see what happened. Oh, my fuzz target, I still had that there.
I was gonna say, you should have used the editor, huh? Would have caught that the first time.
Yeah, I'm bad about using that. Boom. Okay, so now it'll build, it'll deploy, and it'll run the fuzz. So while that's happening, we'll open the web IDE again, and we're going to go ahead and change some code to actually throw an error. So the code that we're going to change is notes routes. So notes and routes.py. There's a part of the code where it says if the length of the message is greater than 1024, message too long, and you see it throws a 400, which is the intended code that it should throw because it's a bad request. I'm going to change this to a 500, which means that it's a server error, that the server crashed. So this would be something that's thrown like if there was an uncalled exception or if just something kind of broke in the backend and we didn't know why. It would throw 500. We're just kind of cheating here just to show this in the demo. But ideally, you'd want to have some path that just crashes unexpectedly in the application. That's what it'd find. It searched for 500s happening in the server by sending it all this random data using that Swagger file. But we're just going to hard code that 500. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and commit that. So I'll commit error code change. I'll start the new merge request. And let's just call it and now we'll just wait for this to run. And while that's happening, I will go into just the docs just to show you a little bit about the web API fuzzing and what it supports. So you need two things for this. You need any of these type of web API types. The application that I have uses the REST API, where you send requests to it and it'll give you responses. And then it'll need one of the following assets. So the asset that I have is the Open API definition, but you can also use HTTP archive or Postman as well. So that'll be what you need. And then the setup is pretty much the same way that I just demonstrated.
Vern, are we missing anything major that would catch us if we were in a demo? Are there any major of those requirements that anything that you know of anyway? Let me just ask it that way. You know, there's nothing worse than being like, we're awesome, and then having someone go, but you don't seem to support, you know, XYZ. Is there anything you know of or heard of so far, or does that cover it?
If you're giving a demo and you want to show this, one thing to note is that if you don't have a base path set up, see how I have this base path? If you don't have that set up, it's not gonna work, because it first looks for the base path, and then it checks if a base path exists. If it doesn't exist, even though I'm scanning /notes, if there's no base path on that URL, it'll just send the 404 and the scan won't even start. That's one thing I noticed for demoing this. But I've defined the base path here in this.
That's good to note. I was also just wondering about the prerequisites, right? You listed, a SOAP or REST API and so on, and GraphQL. Those seem to, or form bodies. Is there anything in that list up there that you've been pinged on before? I just want to make sure. It would be nice to know if there were any gotchas, like if someone said, SOAP wasn't on the list and someone said, I want SOAP, and you'd be like, yeah, we don't have that. Is there anything you've heard of that we're missing? Any feedback?
I haven't heard any. I mean, this is a pretty new feature that's constantly getting iterated on, so I haven't seen much. Like interest in it, but I know it's definitely something big that we're gonna really start pushing. Just because
we've had one customer, I guess since we're recording, I won't say who it is, but someone in the Bay Area, how's that for generic, who has talked about an interest in API fuzz testing. So it was definitely on their wish list. I just, if there were any major glaring gaps in the requirements list, it would be nice to know ahead of time, but they haven't really dove into it much yet. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I don't know of any big ones. I know that it is a little bit of a pain to set up in the beginning. Like if you haven't done it before, it is a little bit of a pain to kind of just get started with it, especially if you haven't used, Swagger or, Open API or any of these things before. A good thing is, like, if you already have these tools, you can just migrate it and just copy it into your GitLab and it'll just work. But if you've never done any of this before and you want to get, the web API fuzzing set up, then it is pretty much a pain because you'd have to learn how to set up the files properly.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad to know. One of the good things is I now at least have in my mind that you've taught us stuff and you've got some examples to start with, which is great, because then we can at least, I can ping you and say, remember that thing? Send me to an example. That's always really helpful.
And this project is pretty much made for y'all, for everybody, anyone that needs to in sales or any teams or any presentations. This project that's public facing is pretty much made for that, and it already has web API fuzzing in it. So like everyone just uses this for different things, but it already have, MRs that have, this same change that I've done before and tested, and you'll be able to kind of view the actual vulnerabilities that were caught by the API fuzz testing itself. So, I mean, my goal overall, like once these sessions are done and everything, is to kind of make these sessions more public facing for everyone. So that way everyone can just point the customer to a project, the customer can just clone that project and then just see all these tools, working. or anyone can just give demos with the same application by just clicking on MRs and just clicking on things. Right now, it's just like a little bit messy because everyone's working on it, but ideally, I'd want it to be in a place where it can just be cloned from a template or something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just bookmarked it.
Nice.
So I don't have to go bother you, at least for the URL.
So for API fuzzing, can I assume it basically detect 500 server side error, right?
Yeah, it looks for 500s.
Okay. And do we have the Web API fuzzing project as an open source project now? Because we acquired Peach Fuzzing,
so I don't think it's open source. I remember talking to the person from from Peach Fuzz to the person whose company that was before. So I had a call, and right now those components are not open source.
Okay, because I understand the dependency scanning is open source now, but not for API fuzzing.
Correct, not the API fuzzing.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why it didn't come up, but you should see something along the lines of the you should see something like this. So I performed the same change here as API fuzzing. I just changed that 5, and I changed it here in this demo project. What you should see within the MR is API fuzzing detected 1 potential vulnerability. And you should be able to click on that, and you should see the vulnerability here for description of the value that was passed to it. The original working value, which is meow, which I set up from the Swagger file, it should have the value that was sent, and it should show what the request sent was, and it should show what you should have seen, which is 200 okay, success no added, and what response you got, which was that the message was too long, that there's a invalid status code 500 was detected and indicated an unexpected error. Did anyone get that? Because now I might need to rerun it here, but
I had no error.
Yeah, no error. Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering if anything has changed, because when I look at it, this one it shows no error. Starting API session, launching test detects we're running, loaded that, scan, testing operation, finished testing, and it said testing complete, no security issues detected. Let me just do something real quick.
Yeah, I got the exact same thing.
You got nothing?
Yeah, same as you.
Okay. Let me open up the web IDE. Let me just do something. /add 500. I'm just going to make this something small. Let me just make sure that application is running. Okay. Okay.
Fernando, about the target URL, I think we have a target URL in the CA YAML file and also in the JSON file as well. Which one is effective?
So it uses both. It verifies both. Like if you don't have it correct in the Swagger, it'll fail. So it needs to be correct here in the Swagger as the base URL, and it needs to be correct also in the CI YAML. What it does is it does like a health check with this one first. So it'll do a health check with that main URL, and then from there it'll use the Swagger to generate the actual like test. So it needs both to be correct.
Okay. So if I want to use a variable for the URL, maybe I need to replace the strings in the JSON file, right?
Correct. Yeah, you would need to. Yeah, you would need to replace it with your project ID. So you would only need to replace in this file. You only need to replace this this project ID here.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you could automate that on the live file, right? Not committing it back, but you could have a little sed script or something go in and take the project ID and put it in before it runs it. If you wanted it to be more portable, right? If you wanted to be able to copy it, but yeah.
You can do like an SCD.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
in the job, in whichever job you run.
So Fern, while this is running, I went and was looking at the simple notes in your public under tech marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, I don't see any of the security stuff there. Is that because I may not have the right membership or something?
Like if you look here?
Correct. No, not there. No, I mean on the left, I'm sorry, in the menu on the left-hand side. Like you have CI, CD, you've got security and compliance, right? And there are several menus that are security and compliance is missing. I wonder if that's okay.
Yeah, I just have to add people to it.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I can.
No worries. Do that later. But I just wanted to make sure I wasn't totally like, I was like, how is it not there? It must be a role issue. Okay. I can ping you later about adding that.
Yeah, let me know later. And whoever wants access, just post in the Slack channel and let me know later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's usually just you have to be added as a maintainer to the project.
Oh, is that right? It's all the way up at maintainer level to be able to see the security and compliance?
Yeah, I don't think developers can see it.
Interesting.
Let's see. So it's still running. So yeah, well, after this is done, yeah, we can take like a quick little break. Let's see how we are on time. So this is. So what time does this end at? Is that 8 Central? So it's like in like an hour and 20 minutes or something.
6 o'clock Pacific, 9 Eastern, 8 Central.
8 Central.
Yeah. But we wouldn't mind a little time back if it turns out to be ending early.
Yeah, it's most likely going to end early. Just because the next section is just going to be it won't be interactive. It'll just be informational about container network security and container host security. And what I'll do is I'll link you like the videos that I have made for that. Just because I don't know if I have Cilium running. I was running into some issues with it. But I'll go over it after this. So let's see. Okay, so I found it now. For some reason, I guess it was sending different data because the fuzzer sends like a bunch of different tests, right? So it sends like a bunch of random data. So it may not hit the random data that will cause the error every time. So now if we go into the MR, you can see that security scanning is loading. expand, and you can see the fuzzing injection with this message, and see that it sent this all this weird stuff right here. So I send all that weird stuff, and that weird stuff broke the code. And this is what it should have shown, but it showed 502 bad gateway. And yeah, we just crashed the system. So now we found out that there is an issue with this notes/add, because it tried notes/notes/add, and that should have given us a 404 because that path doesn't exist. But it gave us a 502 bad gateway. So now we know that there's an issue with probably our ingress, and we can troubleshoot that. So it'll find different issues each time. So yeah, that's what I want to show you. So each time it runs, it could be unique because the data that it sends is unique. So you might find different issues each time. So if there's any questions on web API fuzzing, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, we can take like just a little 10-minute break, and then we'll get on to the active security portion of this.
Well, here I am again with another newbie question, which is, for the fuzz testing, is it possible to set parameters as to what gets sent, or any way to know like what the heck is getting sent and stuff like that?
I think there's a corpus that lets you do that. I'm not sure. I know there is for the coverage-based fuzzing. You can definitely send things that it could try, and it definitely gets smarter. Things that have caused errors before, it'll add it to it, and it'll keep checking it. It does that for the coverage-based fuzzing, but for the web API fuzzing, I think it's just random all the time. Like you can't really set anything or be able to figure out what it's sending. So let me just verify that for you. Yeah, so yeah, you won't really know exactly. You can see this, right? That'll tell you like quick 10, medium 20, medium 50, long 100, but you don't know exactly what those things are doing, right? Because it's stuff that's hidden away from you.
Okay.
So yeah, these are just different things that it needs. Override specific items in your request, just in case you need credentials or different things. Yeah, I don't really see anything around that. It's just, there's just the different configurations that you have, but you don't really know what these configurations are doing. Yeah, so that's the way I answered. So for coverage-based fuzzing, yes, you can add different things that you want to check. For web API fuzzing, you cannot. Right now, that's hidden away. You can only say how many scans to run and which profile to use, but that's all you can do. All right, so I'm gonna go pour myself some more coffee, and I'll be right back. So I brought the dog to help out with the workshop.
Super cute.
Oh, thanks. Hey. Yeah, I have 3 dogs. Let's see if the other ones want to come in.
One for each scanner type.
Pretty much.
SAS, DAST, and S.
And Fuzz. There's Fuzz.
This one's getting a haircut tomorrow.
I was gonna say that's the fuzzy dog, fuzz testing dog.
Little
Yeah,
Shih Tzu.
yeah, we have 2 Shih Tzus and a rat terrier. Yeah, they're all good. They can't see. Their hair has gone they've gone so fuzzy, but they're getting a haircut tomorrow, so they'll be nice. They look so weird with the haircut though. I like them more fuzzy. Hey. All right, let's see what time it is. Might be able to get started. Wait like another minute. So I noticed that someone put the audit event stuff. I didn't add this to this workshop, but that's another cool thing that you can see. It's just in security and compliance. There's audit events, which tells you, which shows just different things that have happened within the system. So you can see added project, added protected branch, and you can see exactly what's in the audit events and the documentation. So I just realized I'm not sharing my screen. So where is it? So if you look at the documentation for audit events, you can see like the different events that are actually audits for a group and the different events that are audits for a project. So you can see just the different things within the system that someone has done, like you know, release was updated, a project was archived, the user was removed, the user was added, just different things like that. And I'll post that here. That's something. It's a question that customers might ask, like, hey, what exactly is shown in audit events? And in order to get to the audit events, let me see. Within your project, you go to security and compliance, and then you go to audit events, and then you can see all the stuff that has happened within there. So change prevent merge request approval from authors from true to false. And then you can see different things, what IP address it came from, what date. So you can do a triage of the system and everything that's occurred on it. So user access via system job, access expired on a certain date, the person was removed. You can just see just a bunch of different things that happen within the system. And then that list that I provided gives you information on what exactly is an audit event. So that's just something I wanted to show. So just going back to this. See, this failed for some reason. Okay, so been having some issues with Cilium lately. So now I'm going to get to the second part of the workshop, which is the active security, which covers container network security and container host security. And I'll show you kind of how to configure that. And I do have 2 videos that if I can't get this working today, I'll show you the 2 videos, and then I'll probably do a one of those CS learn sessions on this stuff as well. I've done one in the past on container network security, and I'll do one on container host security. But pretty much what happens is Let me go to my project. Let me just close everything because I have too many tabs open. Okay. So let's go to Simply Simple Notes. Okay, so you see how I have this .gitlab file here. So this is part of GitLab's managed apps, which installs applications on your system via GitLab managed apps. So, oh yeah, there is the one of me barbecuing. That's the video. So what you do here is in managed apps, there's a config.yaml. You click on that config.yaml and you can define the different applications that you want to install. So here I'm installing Cilium, Ingress, and Falco. So Falco would be container host security, which scans the actual container host for any vulnerabilities like, or any intrusive behavior, such as someone creating files in a certain directory that could be malicious, or someone changing the namespace of a pod, or someone doing some type of activity that way. And then there's Cilium, which enforces network policies. Hold on, little dogs are wanting to leave to get out of here. Hold on. So, so what we do is we install Cilium, we install Falco, and we also need to go to the GitLab CI YAML and enable the managed cluster applications. So with the web IDE, we have to make sure that managed web applications are working. So what I'll do is I'll just disable these other jobs. Secret detection, DAST, container scanning, license scanning, and so what that would do, which I again didn't look at that. So I also need a deploy job for this managed cluster application. Okay. And what this will do is it'll deploy Cilium, it'll deploy Falco, Ingress, and all the components that I need. So you can see what that does in GitLab managed applications. So note that a lot of this is still in alpha and beta stage. So some things might not really work. So these are beta features. And for Cilium specifically, one thing that you have to do is in operations Kubernetes, I have my Kubernetes cluster here. And under advanced settings, I need to set the cluster management project, which is alpha, and I need to set that to the actual project that I'm deploying Cilium on. So this is like one thing that's important to note is that this is still kind of something that's in alpha. So it's not, production level, even though we are using it as production level and we still, we're still showing this as production level, it's still in alpha, and these things are, continuing to get better and increasing, and I'm hoping we'll have it out of this stage pretty soon. So, so we'll have to actually, and a few things about this is that you'll probably have to actually go into the Kubernetes cluster to do the container host security stuff and to view the logs on it. For actually creating network policies, you can do it through security and compliance, and you can do it, let me go to the actual project. You can do it through threat monitoring. And with threat monitoring, you can go to policies, and on the environment, you can add a policy. So I had one deployed called test access. And so let me before I get too far ahead, I'll tell you what network policies are. So network policies what they do is it's pretty much a firewall for Kubernetes. And what it does is it tells which pods in the internal infrastructure can communicate with which other pods. So in this, it tells you what pods can communicate to other pods and back and forth and vice versa. So what's the egress and what's the ingress? And with this particular policy, you can see that on apps with the label test, if any pod wants to talk to it, it needs to have the label access equals true. So that's what this network policy says here. So if a pod doesn't have the label access equals true, it can't communicate with a pod with the label app equals test. Does that make sense? So it's pretty much this. You're making sure things are restricted within your Kubernetes cluster. You know what pods are talking to which pods. You know that someone can't just create a pod and then just start trying to communicate with your internal infrastructure. So it's kind of like a safeguard for people who are working in the company, and you don't want them to let's say you have this team deploying this app, right? And they're on the same namespace as this other team. And you don't want these things to conflict. You don't want these microservices to conflict. You can set these network policies so that way you know that team A won't be affected by the stuff that's delivered by team B. So it's a safeguard in that reason, and it also protects on like maybe malicious action. Someone creates another pod within the system and tries to communicate and do something. You can prevent things like that. It's just firewall for your Kubernetes cluster. So that is container network security. Now, what is container host security? So container host security uses Falco, and what it does is, if you look at this documentation, here's some examples. So what it does is it'll detect things like, is a shell running in the container? So if a shell is running in the container, then what it'll do is it'll post it'll log an error, or it'll log a warning. It'll log something within the log files to say that hey, this was detected running in your container. Hey, there was someone who was writing to a directory holding system binaries. This action was caught. And what can be done by that is you can have alerting in place, so that way someone can be alerted with the Falco alerts if any of those things actually happen. So you can output to a file, to syslog, to an actual program. So for this is showing that it's sending someone mail if something's actually detected. You can, another known thing is you can actually like Slack, you can post to the Slack channel, like everything that's been detected. You can do all these things with things that were detected within the system. So a lot of this is up to you. You would have to specify what you want to run and what you want to happen once these vulnerabilities and these things are detected. And you can even add custom rules, like as seen here in this Falco example. You can learn the syntax and add your own custom rules. And these custom rules are added to this .gitlab folder. Under manage apps, you can have Falco, and in your values.yaml file, you can actually add custom rules. Like this one is, hey, anytime that any new directory is created, so anytime that anyone just runs make dir within the container, I'm gonna go ahead and put an error in the logs. And right now it's important to notice that all that you have is just logs that you can see from this. So there's not really much else that's like front facing from the container host security. There is a roadmap to get this visually within the UI, but right now you just have to actually go into the Kubernetes cluster and actually see the logs in order to be able to work with this.
Fernando, this does work on cloud Kubernetes clusters like GKS, EKS?
Yes. So this works on, once the managed apps are deployed, they're deployed with Falco already, and then they'll already be scanning, they'll already be writing to the log.
Right, because I know it needs configuration. It needs Falco itself to be installed on the host So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because
So
we don't have, yeah.
So this job right here, this apply job, actually installs it on the host. So you can see that got an update, and then it installs it on the actual host. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Kubernetes cluster. And so it'll install all these things on the host. So I'll show you now. Hopefully, hopefully it didn't something didn't happen to it, but we'll see if it works. Because I recently updated this cluster. Okay, so okay, so if I do kubectl get namespace, you should see a namespace called GitLab Managed Apps. So if I do kubectl get pods -n GitLab Managed Apps, so it should show all these things were installed. So you see how you have Falco, and how you have this Hubble relay, and you have Ingress and Nginx, and this. So you see all these things were installed. So I have to clean up this cluster. So unfortunately I won't be able to show you, but I have to clean up this cluster. And what will happen from here? My girlfriend just brought me food. You all saw that. All right. So what will happen from here is you should see Cilium, and you should see all these things running, and that's done by the apply job. So it'll install all these different things on there, and then Cilium, if it was running here, it would control the network policies and manage them. So if I do kubectl get network policies -- namespaces. So see, I had this one here, which is the one that you saw, that you can create through the UI, and you can have it here, and then Cilium, which would be up here, would enforce that. So it would be installed through the GitLab Managed Apps. And then Falco, would also enforce the custom rules and all the other rules that were needed. So if I do kubectl logs, and let's see the actual Falco that's running. So yeah, so the probe, so this cluster is not working. Let me see if I have another cluster that.
I think Falco is crashing, so that's fine. It's fine, man. It's okay.
Yeah, I've been having problems with it recently.
Yeah, I'm just surprised that it's working on GKS, because it needs to be physically installed on the hosting machine. So I wasn't sure that Google will give us access to the host to install software there, but it seems they do. So that's fine. Thank you.
So the reason that's done is because of going back to this job, because we're giving admin access to install these things. So if you look at operations Kubernetes,
yeah,
and when I actually went to the advanced settings, so I'm running all these things as a cluster admin. So I do have the privileges in that sense to be able to install these things.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Thank you.
So let me see. This one might work. This is one that I made recently. Yeah, so Yeah, I'm definitely having a problem with this, but I'll send you the videos of these working, and I'll post them in the Slack channel, and that way y'all can be able to see them. But kind of like the theory is pretty much, just to remember is, you have all these DevSecOps tools, right? That you have to scan the stuff before the code goes into production. But once the code is actually in production, you have these other safeguards, which are the container network security and container host security. And the easy way to remember them is container network security is pretty much a firewall for Kubernetes, limiting communication between pods. And container host security is pretty much checking for malicious activity within the container host itself. So those are the two important things to remember, and how like the benefit and the value is those two. So active security at the end. And I do have demo recordings of these things. If I'm able to get these things working and kind of troubleshoot this, I will update that project, the Simply Simple Notes project, to have it on a working cluster, and I'll try to record something with with it working and deploying onto the cluster. But besides that, I just wanted you to know like the real benefit of those things and like just how they work.
Excellent, thank you.
And so I mean that's all I had for this session today. I mean, I'm open to just sticking around for a little bit and answering any questions, or anything. If anything else, like y'all can have some time back.
Just a quick one. The Simply Simple one we use in this workshop is the same as the public project?
It's a little different. So so the one in the demo systems is more limited. The one that's in the public space, it's the same application, but the one that's public facing has a lot more stuff. Like the one that's not in demo systems has a lot more changes to the project, and that's the one that I constantly make updates on. Like the next updates that I'm making is I'm going to add a username and password to authenticate into it, so I can show that off for DAST and different things like that. So so pretty much like everything that's going to be updated will be updated in the tech marketing one.
In the public one, you mean?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so I can use the instructions, the labs on the public one because I imported that one.
Yeah, it would already be set up, right? It would already be set up with those things. Yeah. So like the lab one goes through like instructions from nothing to then adding stuff, where this one already has everything set up. Yeah.
Okay, good. I have demo tomorrow, so that's good. Yeah, I already set up. Excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, and it can just be used as a reference, and then yeah, just be sure to like just ask me if you want to be a maintainer on that project, or if there's like kind of anything you want to get out of more out of like tech marketing, if you want more of these type of projects, or if there's particular things that you want from Simply Simple Notes that you want to be able to demo, like just certain things that we're thinking of are kind of things like making more microservices that deploy continuously, so we get more of like a real application. Like you have one microservice that's the front end, one that's the back end, and then we kind of show that type of structure. We have more authentication things in place. Like I want to make this Simply Simple Notes something that's like really realistic, that we can always like show customers real use cases, right? So if anyone has any ideas, I'm always open to suggestions and like hearing anyone out.
The microservices one is really good. It's a very common scenario. Would be great.
So yeah, then that concludes our session. So thanks so much. I'll post this workshop later today, the recording, and I'll post it in our Slack channel. So yeah, pretty much that's it. Hope you enjoyed, and hope you like.
You're going to monitor that Slack channel for a little bit.
What was that?
I said, are you going to monitor that Slack channel for a couple more days? Because
yeah,
I'm trying to work through some of the exercises.
Yeah, I'll be monitoring that for a couple of days. So if you want to work kind of like at your own pace and you have any questions, just feel free. Just make sure you put @Fern, so that way I see it and I don't overlook it. But I'll be on that channel.
Okay, awesome.
Fern, got a favor to ask.
Yeah.
First of all, thanks for the session. That was really good. Number 2 is I'm not that bright, and I really like the step-by-step instructions. They work for people like me that aren't bright and learn poorly in live lab settings. I know that we broke demo systems, so kind of owe Jeff an apology. Are those steps available elsewhere besides demo systems? Because I hit this kind of funky error about my open API spec, and I'm pretty sure that's on me because I was just copying and pasting in a hurry. I'd love to be able to go through those instructions at my own pace so I can be as slow as I normally am.
So good thing you mentioned that. So part of our, there's been different workshops on CI/CD, security, different things. So our goal is to release these to be public facing. So that way anyone, can do these workshops. So pretty much the same instructions, but we're gonna have more things like actually creating the cluster and like doing this. So that way anyone that comes in and sees our GitLab Learn stuff can go in and they can follow all these steps within their own GitLab.com instance. So that'll probably be coming closer to the end of May, I'd say. But right now they're just on demo systems.
Yushan, I cloned that project to .com, to GitLab.com, and I did the exercises there. I got everything working with the exception of lesson 5, which I'm thinking is probably a typo somewhere on my end. But the only thing that I noticed for .com is your namespace for your staging environment will be different, so that you have to definitely update. But everything else seems to work fine.
Okay, would you mind? Sorry.
If you think that you were not the smartest, I'm definitely below you. So.
It's the self-deprecating club, huh? You Chen versus Ron versus Ken versus who else wants to be in the imposter syndrome
you were gonna ask a question, and we rudely interrupted you. So what's your question?
No, not at all. It's by the way, all engineers are self-deprecating. We all know that here. Come on, people. So, Ron, would you mind adding me to your project just so I can click fewer buttons?
As long as you don't break it and expect me to fix it afterwards. That's not a problem.
I won't. I'm gonna get a copy for myself. That's all.
For some reason, y'all reminded me of Rodney Dangerfield. I don't get no respect when he the stuff that he says. For some reason.
Actually, Fern, I do have one question for you. So while going through the exercises, I know for lab 4 and lab 5, you pulled out, the traditional scanning, like the SAST and DAST and that type of stuff. I didn't do that. Is it supposed to work if you leave the other stuff in there, or?
Yeah, it should work with everything in there. I just pulled it out for the sake that I didn't want to crash demo systems. So I didn't want to have too many things running. The one thing to note that I know that people may have missed, and I'll share that with you for getting lesson 5 working, particularly, is that you have to make sure that the host is exactly where the application is. So if I go to, which I lost it now, but if I go to my demo systems project, let me see. So for step number 5, where I've seen users have problems in mimicking that, is when they go here to when they actually create this Swagger file. So when it's complete, it should look like this. And I know one thing that a lot of people miss is that you have to change this to be exactly the same as the ID of your actual project. So if it doesn't have the same ID here of your actual project, it'll actually fail. So if you want, we can troubleshoot this later, like why it's failing for you, but you can send me a link to the job that's running, and you can let me know why, and I can review the job and see what could be wrong there.
The job in my case is saying that there weren't any artifacts that were uploaded, so that's why it's not displaying anything. But I might have missed something in a step, so let me tinker with it first.
I think it's the same question I asked in chat. It was there was a change that Fern had to make in order to actually throw an error, and I think it was the I think Toshi was saying it's the route file needed to reduce the limit, the length.
Yeah, so what I did is, if you look at this right here, originally—
I'm not sharing.
Oh, I'm not sharing it. So share screen. Originally what I did is I just had put the 500 here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it doesn't, sometimes with the fuzzing, it won't throw something over 1024 characters. So I just changed it to 10 to always, you know, because it's always going to catch an error with 10. It's always going to send something larger than 10. So I just changed that to catch the error. So I was catching this before, but this is rarer to catch than this in the fuzzing. So I just changed it to 10.
Oh, I only changed the 400 to a 500. That's probably where my problem is then.
Yeah, I'll have to update that in the instructions just because originally like that worked, but it I guess it just happened by chance for me that it worked, but because it sends different things within the fuzz test. But changing it to this is probably always going to work because it's usually going to change something larger than 10.
Fernando, I have one quick question. Do you have a demo for automatic remediation?
That I don't. I think that's for whatchamacallit.
Mainly for container scanning.
And for Yarn.
To the doc, but I couldn't reproduce the the button like resolve with merge request or download patch to resolve something like that. I couldn't reproduce in my demo, so I haven't seen that.
So I've seen it before, but I don't have any like working example now. Like I've done it before with a JavaScript project. So it was a JavaScript project that had vulnerabilities, and then I was able to do it on the Yarn file for dependency scanning. I haven't done it for container scanning before. I'd have to check. That was something that was introduced probably like 3 releases ago, I think.
Yeah, it was released at 11.7, so.
Yeah, I don't have any.
I have one project. I have one. I just need to dig it out from somewhere because there's one prospect who like just had to see it. So I do have one that has a couple Docker containers, and it is actually a really nice process. I will find that project because I have like hundreds of badly organized security projects. Once I find it, I'll toss it into the channel and open it up to everybody.
Okay, let me select in the channel. Thank you.
Yeah, if you could give me a reminder, because, well, again.
Thanks.
Sorry, I have a question, please, and here's a really silly one. So the difference between API and coverage fuzz testing, reading through them, they functionality-wise, they are the same, but API, you pass the Swagger file, which tells what are the APIs available for this application. So random inputs is generated to test these APIs. Coverage testing, and please correct me, it detects the functions in the application. Am I right? Or
so you actually have to do you actually have to add the decorator to the functions, and you have to tell it which file to run on. So it's not like automated like how you think.
Yeah.
You have to add decorators, and you'll have to like, you know, do it file by file, right? And actually call to run it. And what it'll do is it'll just pass a bunch of random data to that function itself. So one does it. Think of one more like unit testing and one more like functional testing, right? The web API fuzzing is like functional testing, right? But imagine that the functional tests are random. So it's sending a bunch of random data to your API to try to crash it. Where the other one's more like unit testing. It's sending a bunch of random data to the functions themselves to try to crash it. So like, let's say you have a function that just prints a string, right? Like it accepts the string, and then it just prints that string, right? In Python. So it'll keep sending a bunch of different strings, and then it might even send like an integer to try to crash it. And then, oh, well, you didn't expect integers, so then it crashes it. So what it does, think of one of it more in the source code and one of it more in the running application.
The running application is the API one, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's sending random requests and random bodies in the requests and random headers in the request to try to crash the running application, where coverage fuzzing is sending random parameters to the function.
So that one, it has to actually know the function footprint. It has to know the inputs and outputs at that level, right, Fern? It has to be that specific down to the actual function versus the API level.
Well, it kind of knows, like you just put a decorator above it and it'll know like what the function requires, but it'll just throw random stuff at it anyways, right? So like, let's say the function just accepts one string. Well, it'll only throw one parameter in there, but it'll throw random stuff in there to try to get it across.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's a little bit smarter than having to like define everything. It'll know like, hey, I have a list of like these 20 random things. I'm going to pass these 20 random things in the function and try to crash it.
Yeah.
I'll go through the documentation to see where to add the decorator. I still need to.
Yeah, that's in the fuzz.py. If you look at the instructions, it'll be in the fuzz.py and you'll see where it's at. And if you look at the documentation, it's different for each language. Uses, Python happens to use decorators, but different languages will need different, syntax.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, now for the third part of this session, which is the snake plants.
Fern, you got 3 dogs. How do you line up the release trains on those dogs?
To what?
How do you line up the release trains on your 3 dogs when you're working the whole day?
There's a doggy door, so they just kind of go.
Okay, so you cheat. Okay, I hear you.
Yeah, I cheat. There's one dog that likes to live out there pretty much. Like she'll be out there the whole day. And then there's 2 dogs that are lazy and they just don't even go outside unless you make them. You just tell them, hey, let's go pee.
There's no like coyotes or, like hawks near your area that would be predators or?
It's pretty suburban. Like there's not really, where I used to live, I've seen coyotes before and I've actually had skunks in my backyard and they sprayed my dog twice. So there was a skunk in my backyard that my dog went up to attack it, and then it's the worst smell ever. And it'll stay no matter how many times you give the dog a bath, that smell will be there. So just know, you never want your dog to get sprayed by a skunk. Yeah, so yeah, pretty much.
Thanks very much, man. I appreciate it.
Right, yeah, well, thank you very much.
Vern. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to keep posting on the channel if you need anything, but thanks for being part of this and really appreciate everyone and all your great questions.
Awesome.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Y'all take care.